We live in a world that constantly tells you you're not enough, not smart enough, not attractive enough, not productive enough, not healed enough. From school grades to dating apps to influencer content, every message repeats the same thing. Something's wrong with you. And when you hear that enough, you start to believe it. You begin to walk around with this invisible label on your chest, broken. But here's the truth. You're not broken. You're just disconnected. Disconnected from who you are. Disconnected from what you feel. Disconnected from what you need. And that disconnection isn't your fault. It's the side effect of growing up in a world that rewards masks, not authenticity. You learn to survive by fragmenting yourself. You learn to suppress feelings that were too much. You hid the parts that didn't fit the mold. You silenced your voice to keep the peace. And slowly, without realizing it, you became a stranger to your own inner world. You wake up tired. You people please on autopilot. You don't know what you want anymore. You scroll for hours, chasing a dopamine hit that never fills the emptiness. You find yourself trapped in overthinking, self-doubt, and emotional numbness. You wonder, why do I feel so off? So empty? So unlike myself? And the cruel part is, you blame yourself for this. You think something's wrong with you, that you just need more confidence, more discipline, more healing. But Jung reminds us, wholeness is not about perfection. It's about integration. You don't need to fix yourself. You need to come back to yourself. Let me tell you about Jamie, a 26-year-old woman, always put together, always smiling. She had the career, the relationship, the Instagram-worthy life. But behind closed doors, she was exhausted. Every decision made her anxious. She second-guessed everything. She felt fake around her friends, disconnected from her partner, and worst of all, disconnected from herself. Therapy helped her see it. She had spent years becoming who she thought she should be, and in the process, she abandoned who she actually was. She buried her anger. She numbed her sadness. She silenced her needs, all to be good enough. Jamie wasn't broken. She was split. Her inner world was divided between who she was and who she had learned to be. That's the modern identity crisis. We confuse fitting in with being whole. We trade truth for approval, and we call that success. But that comes at a cost, the cost of inner peace, the cost of clarity, the cost of authenticity. And this is not just Jamie's story. It's the story of so many people who feel lost, but can't explain why. So many who wake up and feel like something's missing, but can't name what. It's not a lack of willpower. It's not laziness. It's the inner split, the gap between your outer image and your inner truth. And until you close that gap, no amount of productivity or external validation will make you feel whole. Because what you're really searching for is not better habits or more healing. You're searching for the lost parts of yourself, the parts you silenced, the parts you buried, the parts you were told were too much. Your anger, your sensitivity, your intuition, your needs, they didn't disappear. They went underground, and they've been calling you ever since. Every time you feel anxious without a clear reason, every time you say yes when you meant no, every time you shrink yourself to keep someone else comfortable. That's the split. That's the signal. And here's where your healing begins. Not in becoming someone new, but in remembering who you are. Not in cutting off parts of yourself, but in reclaiming them. You are not broken. You were never broken. You just need to come home. You wake up You reach for your phone. Before you even feel your breath, you're already inside someone else's world. Scrolling, comparing, absorbing. You haven't met yourself, but you've met hundreds of filtered versions of others. You haven't heard your own thoughts, but you've read a dozen opinions you didn't ask for. This is how the split begins. Not with a trauma, not with a tragedy, but with quiet disconnection, repeated every single day. Modern life doesn't ask who you are. It only asks what you produce. How fast you reply, how long you stay available, how valuable you are to others. And slowly, you start living outward. For validation, for attention, for survival. You become what people need you to be, not what you truly are. This is how you become a stranger to yourself. You silence the voice inside, just to hear the world a little louder. Because being wanted feels safer than being alone. Because being busy feels more productive than being still. Because being accepted feels easier than being real. And over time, you forget how to listen. You stop noticing the signals, the tension in your chest, the dull pain in your gut, the subtle anxiety that comes when you're around certain people or doing things you never wanted to do. You convince yourself it's fine, it's normal, it's just what life is. But something inside you knows. It aches. It whispers, "This isn't me." But you keep going. Because everyone else is doing the same. Because disconnection is the default. Because pretending is rewarded. And this is how the split gets deeper. One part of you plays the game, performs, smiles, says yes when you mean no. Another part watches, silent, furious, longing to be seen, longing to be heard, but terrified of what might happen if you stop pretending. This is the inner war most people don't talk about. The conflict between your true self and your constructed self. The version of you that adapted to survive, and the version of you that wants to live. You can feel this war in your relationships. You say, "I love you," but you don't feel safe. You say, "I'm okay," but your body is in survival mode. You say, "I'm just tired," but what you mean is, "I'm disconnected and I don't know how to come back." And no one notices, because they're fighting the same battle too. This isn't just about mental health. It's about identity. When you live in a world that constantly tells you who to be, it takes radical courage to remember who you are. And the longer you ignore that split, the more anxious you become, the more exhausted, the more reactive. You think you're lazy, but you're just drained from being two people at once. You think you're emotionally unstable, but you're just tired of living against yourself. You think you're broken, but you're just fragmented. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not too sensitive. You're not too much. You're not weak. You're just out of alignment, disconnected from your core, from your body, from your boundaries, from your truth. And reconnection feels impossible because we weren't taught how to do it. We were taught to strive, to outperform pain, to outthink emotion, to smile through confusion, to climb the ladder of success, even if we're dying on the inside. We were taught to survive, but not to feel, not to heal, not to slow down enough to hear the truth beneath the noise. I once worked with someone who had it all. The title, the relationship, the curated life on social media. But every time she sat in silence, she panicked, because the silence reminded her of how far she drifted from herself. She had built a life that looked perfect, but it wasn't hers. She was constantly anxious, not because she was broken, but because her life was built around someone she wasn't. That's the cost of disconnection. You lose your center, and everything becomes noise. You doubt your intuition. You ignore your needs. You push away your feelings, and then you wonder why everything feels heavy. The split within you doesn't scream. It whispers. It numbs. It distracts. And most people don't realize they're disconnected until it's too painful to ignore, until the breakdown happens, until the anxiety attacks don't stop, until the relationship ends, until the job becomes unbearable. But these moments, they are not the end. They're the invitation, the call to return, to reintegrate, to become whole again, not by adding more, not by doing more, but by remembering what you lost, by feeling what you avoided, by being radically honest about who you've become and who you want to be. Wholeness isn't a destination. It's a return. It's a remembering. You were never meant to split. You were never meant to perform to be loved. You were never meant to abandon yourself just to belong. That pain you feel? It's not weakness. It's a compass pointing you back home, to your truth, to your core, to the version of you that's been waiting patiently, quietly, for you to come back. You were born whole, not perfect but whole, with instincts, with a raw emotional compass, with desires you couldn't yet name. But the moment you entered the world, you were handed a silent script. Be good, be agreeable, be what we want you to be. And slowly, piece by piece, you began cutting off the parts of yourself that didn't fit that script. You stopped expressing anger. You learned to smile even when you were sad. You stayed silent when things felt wrong. Because when you did speak, you were punished, ignored, or shamed. This is how the split begins. This is how we abandon who we are in order to survive who we were told to be. And the more you abandoned, the more praise you received. You were called mature, selfless, easy to raise. No one noticed the cost, not even you, until later, until you couldn't feel joy anymore, until every relationship felt fake, until you were praised but still empty. You didn't know why you were anxious all the time, why every decision felt like a performance, why you felt more comfortable pretending than being honest. That's not a personality issue. It's not because you're broken. It's because you've been living with a self that was edited, a version of you that was safer, quieter, more accepted, but not more whole. You can't cut yourself into pieces and expect to feel complete. You can't perform your way into peace, because authenticity isn't found in what others approve of. It's found in what you no longer need to hide. Think about it. How many times have you swallowed your needs just to keep someone else comfortable? How often do you say, "I'm fine," when you're really drowning? How many relationships have you maintained just because you didn't want to be difficult? You became agreeable to stay loved. But now you can't recognize yourself anymore. This is the war. The war between the real you and the version that kept you safe. The version that got love, validation, acceptance at the cost of your truth. You were taught that survival requires silence, that belonging means abandoning, that love only comes when you perform. But real healing starts when you realize you never needed to split. You just needed space to be seen. You just needed love that didn't require masks. And now you're grown. But the rules are still running in your mind. Rules you never agreed to, but internalized like gospel. Don't be too much. Don't upset anyone. Don't show weakness. And when you do break those rules, even now, you feel guilt, shame, fear. That's not your intuition. That's conditioning. That's the nervous system responding to the trauma of early rejection. And most of that trauma wasn't even dramatic. It was silent. It was the disapproving look, the cold shoulder, the love that was withdrawn when you disobeyed. You weren't abused. You were trained to abandon parts of yourself so you could feel worthy of love. But here's the truth. Anything that demands you abandon yourself is not love. Anything that requires you to split is not safe. You're not broken. You're just tired of pretending. You're tired of carrying a false self into every conversation. You're tired of hiding your needs just to avoid being called too sensitive. You're tired of shaping yourself to be loved by people who only accept fragments of you. This exhaustion you feel, this anxiety, this inner war, isn't weakness. It's the soul's rebellion. It's the healthy part of you saying, I want to come back home. I want to stop hiding. I want to feel whole again. And you can. But wholeness doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from integration, from letting the wrong parts back in, from allowing the messy, honest, raw parts to finally have a voice. You don't need to destroy who you've become. You just need to reconnect with who you were before the world told you who to be. That version of you is still there, not gone, just buried. And the more you listen, the more you choose truth over approval, the more you reclaim what you lost. That's how the war ends. Not with another mask, not with more control, but with radical acceptance of every part of you, even the ones you were told not to love. Control feels safe. It feels sharp, defined, reliable. It gives us the illusion that we're in charge, that nothing can go wrong if we just plan right, if we prepare enough, if we avoid mistakes, if we avoid people, if we avoid vulnerability. But what we call control is often just fear wearing a mask. It's fear of chaos, fear of pain, fear of not being enough. And so we try to dominate the mess. We clean the desk. We clean the inbox. We clean the emotions. We suppress the anger. We bury the sadness. We pretend we don't care. We think we're in control. But inside we're exhausted, tense, disconnected, anxious. We call it being productive. We call it being disciplined. But it's not real discipline. It's fear. Real discipline doesn't come from fear. It comes from understanding. Understanding the chaos inside of us. Understanding what we've been running from, and slowly choosing not to run. We all know that person who's hyper-organized, but emotionally volatile. Everything looks perfect on the outside. But if one plan changes, they snap. If someone challenges them, they collapse. They hold themselves together through force. But the moment life pushes back, they shatter. That's not discipline. That's survival. Let's talk about Mia. She was always top of her class. Had a bulletproof routine. Gym at 6. Emails by 7:30. Perfect hair. Perfect posture. Perfect mask. But when her boyfriend broke up with her, she fell apart. Because control can't save you from grief. It can't hold you when you feel unlovable. It can't whisper you're safe when all you've ever done is suppress. Mia realized something. She had mastered control, but she had no relationship with herself. She never allowed herself to feel. She never asked, what am I avoiding through this routine? What pain am I covering up with perfection? When she finally stopped micromanaging her pain and started listening to it, she realized her whole life was built around not feeling abandoned again. And suddenly her discipline wasn't about perfection anymore. It became about care, self-respect, real healing. This is the turning point, when control becomes curiosity, when rigidity turns into awareness, when punishment becomes support. Self-discipline is not restriction. It's not just doing hard things. It's doing the right things, for the right reasons, at the right time. It's saying no to your impulses, not because you hate yourself, but because you love yourself, because you see a future you deserve, and you're willing to choose it, even when it's hard. But to do that, you must first meet the parts of you that you've tried to control out of existence. The lazy one, the messy one, the needy one, the jealous one. They're not your enemies. They're messengers. They're showing you where it hurts. They're showing you what you've denied. And unless you acknowledge them, you'll keep fighting them. You'll keep controlling yourself until you suffocate. Integration requires a deeper discipline, not just doing more, but feeling more, seeing more, sitting with the ugly parts, without running away, without numbing, without pretending. You don't need to fix everything today. You need to stop fighting yourself. You need to stop confusing avoidance with strength. You need to stop calling punishment a plan. And you need to start practicing compassion with structure, freedom with focus, rest with responsibility. That's real power. That's the path to wholeness, not through domination, but through devotion. Because the truth is, you're not out of control. You're out of touch with the part of you that's been trying to speak in anxiety, in resistance, in chaos, in breakdowns, in burnout. That part of you doesn't need more control. It needs more connection. It needs to be heard and held, not managed, not silenced. So the next time you feel the urge to overcorrect, to overplan, to overperform, pause. Ask yourself, what am I trying to control? And beneath that, what am I really afraid to feel? That question could be the door to the healing you've been looking for. Healing starts with a boundary, not a wall, but a line drawn with care. A line that says, this far and no further. For too long, you have given away pieces of your peace, your energy, your truth, to people who took without asking, to situations that drained you dry, to relationships that made you smaller. You thought that loving meant always being available, always saying yes, always pushing through discomfort. But that kind of love leaves you empty, disconnected, unseen. The truth is, when you don't set boundaries, you lose yourself. Not suddenly, but bit by bit. Like water slipping through fingers. You become a version of you that no longer feels alive. You feel exhausted, confused, anxious, because your energy is scattered everywhere, and nothing feels stable. You try to fix it by working harder, by trying to please more, by ignoring your feelings, but the root of your pain is not outside, it's inside. It's the lack of boundaries, that silent permission to be overlooked, to be dismissed, to be forgotten. I remember Anna. She was a caregiver to everyone, a friend, a partner, a daughter, always saying yes, always sacrificing herself, until one day she realized she had nothing left. No energy, no voice, no identity. She was angry, but she didn't know how to say no, because saying no felt like being selfish. She feared losing love. She feared abandonment, but the moment she drew her first boundary, something shifted. She told a friend she needed space. She told her partner she needed time. She stopped answering every call. She stopped making herself small. At first, guilt came. Anxiety followed. She worried about judgment. But then, she noticed something else. She felt relief. She felt power. She felt alive. Because boundaries are not barriers. They are bridges. Bridges to your authentic self. Bridges to respect. Bridges to healing. When you detach from people and situations that do not honor your boundaries, you reconnect with yourself. You learn to listen to your body, to your heart, to your needs. And in that listening, you find wholeness, not because you've pushed others away, but because you've invited yourself in. You've chosen you. And that choice is the foundation of every healthy relationship, because you cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot give what you do not have. And when you protect your energy, you show others how to treat you. Boundaries are not walls built out of fear. They are fences built out of love. Love for yourself. Love that demands respect. Love that refuses to be ignored. It's okay to say no. It's okay to protect your time. It's okay to walk away when something doesn't serve you. Because every yes given without choice chips away at your wholeness. Detachment is not rejection. It is self-care. It is clarity. It is freedom. And with freedom, you reclaim your power. You reclaim your peace. You reclaim your life. So ask yourself, where am I giving away my peace? Who drains my energy? What situations make me feel small? And what boundaries do I need to set today? It won't be easy. Old fears will whisper. Doubts will arise. But remember, healing is a journey, and every step you take towards setting a boundary is a step toward being whole.